Well, this is a special place because Aboriginal history of the Menang Noongar tribe, Oyster Harbour fish traps, a place where Aboriginal people came together, collaborated and worked together to catch fish. It would have been the men's role to catch the fish and then to take it back to the family who would have been camped around the area here. This is only just one site, and I'm sure that it would have plenty of family connections and oral history and even totemic connections as well. And smack bang in the middle of a songline that goes from Albany through to Raventhorpe, right along the coastal region of the Menang country and into Gorang country and then into Wajiri country. As far as I'm aware, this is the only first time that something like this has ever been spoken about and discussed through what we're doing now and how we're going to go about it. But I think, working in collaboration and creating partnerships with Aboriginal elders and Aboriginal families and South Coast NRM, UWA, Curtin, and other key stakeholders in the region, I think that would only be a lot more stronger and powerful if it's all united, so that we're all talking in one language, and that could only be beneficial for the broader community and for our next generational leaders and elders.
I'm kind of more interested in intangible heritage, the stories, the song, the language embedded in landscape. And just as the fish traps here can seize, capture nourishment to share, so can those stories and songs can capture and seize ways of understanding and nourishment for us, spiritual, intellectual. I believe the song and storylines contribute to the awareness of where to be at what time. It's a story that gives you that information, or the song that gives you that information with the land, not a sense of time or in isolation a sense of what the animals or the plants are doing, but it's the intersection of those different sort of systems or those rhythms. And that's the great intellectual gift that resides in storylines and songlines, I think. Do have, of course, a strong oral tradition, but the brutal realities is these sort of things. 10% surviving the first 50 years of colonisation and apartheid-like regime for most of our shared history. A lot of effort put into destroying this sort of knowledge and heritage. Now to get that back in that almost a post-Holocaust situation, post-catastrophic situation, we need as many people working together coming from different directions, from different aspects, to rebuild, recover, reshape that heritage that's respectful to antiquity and the people that first created human society in this little part of our planet, and how we can build that up in ways to enrich all of us, nourish all of us. The paperwork, the archival stuff, the linguist stuff, which is quite hard for a lot of Indigenous communities to access. We're going to be pulling that into the mix. We're going to be pulling in oral history. And instead of opposing paper knowledge and oral history knowledge, we're combining them and value adding through those sort of processes. And I think that in itself, that business of recovery, return and recovery, those sort of orbits, which feature in old stories, our old stories, that's the sort of way we're working. Nganang Demanga, Keachin Mia, born in Warrabin, King George Town, translated, and this is Daisy Bates collected this, it's public material. My old people, or me and my old people, our eyes, our gaze like spears cutting through the bush toward where things are becoming bad at King Georgetown. Now that's a negative narrative in a way, but the fact that a colonial place name like King Georgetown is contained within a frame of Noongar language means it's contained within that deep, old, ancient traditions that first created human society here. That's a position I more and more, that's the long journey. That's where I'd like to be.
I've learnt that most of the textbooks that I was taught about at university, most of the theory pertaining to this part of Australia and other parts are completely inappropriate for a landscape of this age, because they come from the grand centres of learning in the Enlightenment tradition of Europe and North America now, most of which countryside was under ice just 12,000 years ago and completely rejuvenated and fertile soils as a consequence. And here, where we're standing right now, you have to go back 250 million years to last see an ice age of note. And since that 250 million year date, just rainfall itself has worn down this country into tremendous flatness, if you like, but tremendous complexity in terms of soils, and the fauna and flora have had unparalleled opportunities to persist through time. So yes, there is an international story, and I think a wonderful global heritage, because we have this combination of biodiversity that's evolved such unusual conditions, combined with persistent human occupation for 50, 60,000 years. And this biodiversity that I'm privileged to work on has been bequeathed to us by that long period of human presence and management of Noongar people in the southwest. And there are people here who are still rich in knowledge. There's been a lot of pain and cultural suppression with Noongar people, but a few people have escaped stolen generation and have continuous connection through their families to traditional language, traditional knowledge. And I just wonder, are there not things that all of us can learn here in Western Australia and across the world in similar landscapes that might help us develop a more sustainable way of living in such places? Here's just two examples of other shellfish that are abundant in this habitat. This is a cockle called Catalysia, and behind me is a substantial midden of this bivalve. These are eaten by white folks too. You know, they picked it up straight away from Noongars, good tucker. Mussel shells also here. Noongar people have harvested these forever. And my question with my Noongar teachers is, can we help restore cultural heritage and cultural knowledge through walking together, through combining Western science techniques to understand the biology of some of these critters, and then repair and restore and enable cultural food to continue. And the same applies with plants, really. So surrounding here, every plant has its own story, and this is just one of them. This is found right across southern Australia. It's called coastal sword sedge. The Noongar name is Gurbane, and this is carbohydrate on the march anywhere along the beaches of southern Australia. And it's a place also for fishing, as you've already explored with Ezard and Kim to some degree. And that just begs the question, every good fisherman knows you get your hands a bit mucky when you do that. So how would Noongars clean themselves up after harvesting either fish or gutting a kangaroo or eating a goanna? And scattered around here is this plant. It's called red-eye wattle, and my Noongar teacher, Lynette Knapp, tells me as soon as she sees this, she knows the old women have been here. This is a campsite, because it's a plant. Her oral tradition is from Esperance to the east of us, about 500 or 600 kilometres. that's been brought by the old women in their coots, in their bags. The seed are partly edible, but this has important medicinal properties. And even more important, if you get the thicker things here, which are green pods of the wattle, so those, the leaves are narrower, so they're not as practical or as good as what I'm going to show you. So if you could just apply a bit of water to my hands. And there you've got beautiful soap. So the Songlines Sustainability project to me is a really exciting combination of the key ingredients to walk together in a respectful way with Noongar people and to reveal their heritage in a way that it is accessible to all. As a West Australian, in talking to elders, I regard those stories as part of my heritage now, and I need to understand them and be able to celebrate them with my Noongar friends, with due acknowledgement that this is Noongar stuff. So it's two great cultural traditions that could be brought together. As a student, I was taught that we're standing in a city, sure, with a few accoutrements, but essentially a wilderness. And the more I've looked at the wilderness, the more it's plainly obvious that this is a deeply humanised landscape with the evidence there, light of footprint, very subtle, but what a bequest. The humanised landscape can be, in some small places, intensively managed, and the best example we have is the Middleton golf course behind us, because if you look at that, you'll see it's classic golf course, nice green lawns and linear copses of peppermint trees, as it turns out here. A big Noongar camp was there during the earliest colonial days, and the oral history continues for that. And if you look at Ensign Dale's panorama of Albany, this wonderful 360-degree view that was published in early 1830s, you would swear you're looking at the same view we've got today. Linear copses of wood and grassy understory surrounding it. That's exactly what the Noongars were doing. They were creating habitat, rangeland farming for the big macropods, and the thick stuff just behind us here on the granite hill is ideal habitat for tamar, for quokka, for possum. So they left this stuff unburnt. Very sensible. They protected it from fire.
Spirituality is all about, I suppose, cultural empowerment, cultural connection to country, to land, to language, to song, and to dreaming. Stories and oral connection that comes from remote, regional, down to this country. I mean, they might start out there, but they all end here. And then you got some that starts from here and go out there. So it's all interactive and interconnective.
To the east of us here, that's my ancestral country. Ezard's connected east of here, which is taboo country because of massacres that occurred there. How do you reconnect via a hostile history like that? You have to rely on your people, a community of people descended from there, and pulling together the language, stories and songs that those people told for eons, us pulling those pieces together and reconnecting all the bits. And we know phrases of song lines, we know pages, you might say, of storylines. I do, fragments. What's of great excitement and its possibility is going to these areas of country with a community descended from there and reconnecting those bits. Land, community, story, song. And we make ourselves instruments for the spirit of place in doing that. Not only making the sounds, but being in those places and following in the footsteps of ancestors, as many have said.
I got very emotional back there at the campsite, and you can't really explain it. There's no explanation for why all of a sudden you're sort of all full. And I said to that, I just feel full. And like, what do you mean? Well, you can't explain. I feel full of tears. I feel full of joy. Like when you've been away from, somebody's been away for a long time and they've actually returned on a journey, and you rush out to meet them, and there's all these hugs and tears, and it's a joy, but you're shedding tears, and it's the same kind of thing.